Yes, I didn't see him. What are you looking so sad about, Jack?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. I mean, that's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting a drink of water. I'm late getting on, but you talk. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talk about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, one time during my career, I was on a bum of the month tour.
Bum of the month? I would have been a bum compared to you.
What's happening, my people? It's Cast Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right. You know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Box Story, bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Miss Cass, Mike Rim, salute Mike, salute to everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cass Sports, the Box Story. Today, the Leonard-Duran Trilogy. That's right, it's Monday. Time for another classic trilogy. Today we're going to be looking at Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard. I'm going to say two classic fights because we could have did without that third one, but it was a part of the trilogy, so we're going to cover it. But that great first fight and the Nomad second fight, we're going to go in deep on them. Got a lot to get to today, so let's start. Of course, we're going to dig back into the archives first with our classic fight of the day. Okay, but salute to Mike River, everybody out there in Warrior Land watching. But today's fight of the day is Bernard Hopkins versus Felix Trinidad. B-Hop does it his way. September 29th, 2001. Hopkins versus Trinidad. September 29th, 2001. And remember, this was a couple weeks after 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center up there in New York. And that had a bearing on this fight. But we're going to get to it. Let's go. Hopkins versus Trinidad. B-Hop does it his way. Back in 2001, Bernard the Executioner Hopkins' stubborn, persistent drive to reach the peak of the mountain finally paid off. He scored the biggest win of his career to establish himself as both a latter-day boxing great and a major attraction. But unlike many before him, Hopkins didn't rely on world-renowned trainers, a well-connected manager, a big money network deal, or a fan-friendly style to get to the top. After 12 years as a pro, and having tied Marvelous Marvin Hagler for the second most successful title defenses in middleweight history, Hopkins didn't even have a promoter. As Frank Sinatra, old Blue Eyes himself, might have put it, B-Hop did it his way. Okay? B-Hop did it his way. And there is the executioner slash alien. And B-Hop got few breaks back around that time, okay? Just 13 years prior to this, Hopkins was inmate number Y4145 in cell block D of the Graterford State Correctional Facility, sentenced to 18 years for armed robbery. A teenage Hopkins was just another statistic in the prison system. And there was little reason to think he'd be anything more than that. Despite disciplining himself, becoming a prison amateur boxing champion, and being released in less than 5 years, Bernard was just another poster boy for recidivism to the warden, who muttered to Bernard on his way out, "You will be back." That's what the warden told him on his way out. "You will be back." But B-Hop never went back. Instead, his journey had just begun, albeit with a few significant bumps in the road, as his career got off to as discouraging a start imaginable. A loss in his pro debut, followed by 16 months of inactivity. By the time B-Hop got back in the ring, a 5-time national amateur champion by the name of Felix Tito Trinidad was gearing up to make his own professional debut in Miramar, Puerto Rico, at just 17 years of age. Now, unlike Hopkins, Trinidad would be on the short track toward professional glory, winning his first world title with a sensational knockout of Maurice Blocker, just 3 years later after making his debut, okay? Just 3 years in, Tito Trinidad got his first world title. And there is Tito, right there. Fight of the day, Bernard Hopkins versus Felix Trinidad. There's Tito. Tito was nothing less than a hero to his fellow Puerto Rican people, okay? So, now the paths of Hopkins and Trinidad to Don King's middleweight unification tournament could hardly have been more different. Now, while Hopkins lived, ate, and slept in the grimy depths of the 160-pound division, Trinidad viewed the middleweight title as little more than a stepping stone in establishing himself as one of the greatest Puerto Rican fighters of all time. Having unified belts at both welterweight and junior middleweight, with career-defining wins over Oscar De La Hoya and Fernando Vargas, Tito was already nearing the pound-for-pound pinnacle. And if any skeptics had reservations about Tito carrying his explosive power up to 160 pounds, his demolition of seasoned champion William Joppy in front of a raucous Madison Square Garden crowd quelled those concerns, okay? Quelled those concerns. And there's Tito right there, him and Fernando Vargas. He stopped Fernando in December of 2000, okay? RNE Boxing in the building. Okay, what's up, RNE Boxing? So good to see you today, my friend. And Mike Mazik in the building. What's up, Mike? How are you today? Mike Rim, RNA Boxing, Mike Mazik. Salute. Okay, the fight of the day is Bernard Hopkins versus Felix Tito Trinidad. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, right there, that's, I didn't change it, I'm sorry. That's Tito and Fernando Vargas. Tito stopped Fernando in December of 2000 before he faced B-Hop, okay? So, but where Trinidad was a matinee idol, being groomed to be the next unified and middleweight kingpin, Bernard Hopkins was just your regular blue-collar worker, bringing his lunch pail to the biggest stage of his pro career. Now, despite 12 successful title defenses in the 5 years he had held the IBF title, Hopkins was the underdog, with an overconfident Trinidad predicting he would knock the executioner out in the opening round. Okay? Tito said, B-Hop going to sleep in the first round. Now, there was a significant amount of bad blood between the fighters' camps, all of which reached a crescendo when Hopkins threw the Puerto Rican flag on the ground in front, guess where, of a huge crowd in San Juan, Puerto Rico, at a press conference. Okay? Now, while Hopkins was lucky to get out of Puerto Rico in one piece, the incident made a mark on Trinidad's psyche and may have reshaped his approach to the fight. After that incident, Tito was not only motivated to unify the middleweight division, he was now facing a man villainized by his entire country. Not only was Trinidad expected to beat B-Hop, Puerto Rico's favorite son was now expected to punish and humiliate Hopkins. Okay, after the incident with the flag. Now, his country wanted Tito to beat B-Hop down. Yeah, there's the incident where he threw the flag on the ground at the press conference in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Okay, yeah, they was after B-Hop. They said, watch the airport, the boats, the bus stations. Feel like he gonna catch a bus from Puerto Rico to Philly, but they said, watch him. Don't let him out of here. We want him. But he made it out in one piece, so then it was up to Tito to beat him down when they got him in the ring. Okay. So, to interact on his island and people see him and say, kill Bernard Hopkins. That's a lot of pressure for one man to bear for 4 or 5 weeks, said Hopkins in a later interview, stating He expected Trinidad's countrymen to do the work for him in unnerving the San Juan native. B-Hop said, yeah, now Tito got all that pressure to beat him down. That's going to work against Tito. That's the way B-Hop was looking at that, right? But then, just 4 days before the big fight was scheduled to take place, and less than 4 miles away from the fight's venue, Madison Square Garden, the towers of the World Trade Center burned and collapsed on September 11th, a disaster that put the entire country on pause, let alone the build up for a championship prize fight. So now, with New York City and the rest of the country in a state of disarray, the last thing on anyone's mind was Hopkins versus Trinidad, especially as New Yorkers worked to see if survivors could be found under tons of rubble in Manhattan. The entire country tried to make sense of a cataclysmic disaster that had taken thousands of lives and shaken global politics to its foundations. Yeah, so 9/11 happened. The fight was supposed to be that 9/11 was on a Tuesday, remember? This fight was supposed to be the following Saturday after that. So they wasn't going to have, especially in New York. If the fight had been anywhere else, it probably would have went on, but they wasn't going to have no boxing match, especially in New York after that. And there's Hopkins and Trinidad. So of course it got postponed. Okay, of course it got postponed. So organizers had no choice but to indefinitely postpone Hopkins versus Trinidad. And while B-Hop could easily make the short track back to his home city of Philadelphia to train in the interim, it was more difficult for Trinidad to find a way back to Puerto Rico due to added travel restrictions, right? So yeah, B-Hop just, went on back down to Philly. But it was hard for Tito to go all the way back to Puerto Rico. Plus, with the travel restrictions after that had happened, after the planes ran into the towers and everything, so Tito had to stay in New York, right? In fact, keeping Tito in New York became the only way for Don King to keep the fight alive before the match was rescheduled for the 29th of that month. And now, this showdown for the undisputed middleweight title took on a new and greater significance, as it would be the first major sporting event staged in a devastated city since the 9/11 attacks. Now, the situation was far from ideal in every respect, but perhaps especially so for Trinidad. Unlike Hopkins, who could insulate himself from the turmoil and keep training in the city of brotherly love, Tito remained in New York, where he helped the struggling population as much as he could. A few short weeks before the 9/11 attacks, Trinidad was primed to avenge his people for Bernard's disrespectful stunt of throwing the flag on the ground. But the mood was completely different now. Tito was primed, after that incident when B-Hop threw the flag on the ground, and now the fight that postponed kind of took Tito's edge off a little bit. So as Trinidad walked into the ring in Madison Square Garden on the 29th, one sensed that the zeal for vengeance had waned. Yeah. One sensed that the zeal for vengeance had waned. It is the burning towers, one of the burning towers. I guess that was before they got the second one, right? Yeah, that was on a Tuesday when that happened. The fight was supposed to have been that following Saturday. Yeah, so they thought Tito had kind of lost his edge when the fight got postponed for from the 11th to the 29th, like a couple weeks. After all, there was no way Puerto Rican fans could boo the national anthem they had for months before at the Trinidad versus Joppy fight, right? Because you have to be hot through the Puerto Rican flag on the ground. You know, now, after this happened, no way anybody could boo the United States flag and the national anthem after what just happened, right? Now, Hopkins versus Trinidad was an entirely different atmosphere. One now centered on bringing people together and rebuilding a hurting nation with pugilistic entertainment. In one of his more humane public gestures, Don King even reserved a section of floor seats for New York first responders at this fight. Make no mistake, it was still a largely pro-Trinidad crowd. But that fervent pro-Puerto Rican resentment that had made the garden come to life against Joppy was not present because of the 9/11 attacks. Okay. What was present was the career best version of Bernard Hopkins, who executed his strategy to perfection. For 9 rounds, he outboxed the smaller man, peppering Tito with a stiff jab and a crisp right hand, and while managing distance and keeping himself out of harm's way. As the fight progressed, so did Hopkins' physicality. The Philadelphia native gradually imposing his size on the inside to further frustrate Trinidad. With 33 knockouts in 40 fights, Tito was certainly not accustomed to being manhandled and pushed around, nor to getting tagged with hard right hands by a slippery opponent who angled out of the pocket whenever Trinidad tried to counter. B-Hop fought a great tactical fight that night, did he, y'all? From the opening bell, B-Hop was the boss. As the fight progressed, Trinidad, as if to keep his own doubts at bay, kept asking his father and chief second if he was winning. Now, while Trinidad Sr. repeatedly assured his son that he was ahead, Tito's desperation was apparent in round 10, when he forced Hopkins to the ropes and unloaded with everything he had, his aggression resulting in a prolonged toe-to-toe exchange in 2001's Round of the Year. Okay? Round of the Year, that fight. Round 10 was Round of the Year. But unlike prior foes, whose spirit eventually broke under Tito's pressure and power, B-Hop answered virtually every shot with expert catch-and-shoot counters before closing the round with his biggest statement of the fight, a right uppercut that had the Puerto Rican idol in a world of trouble. It had been a thrilling and memorable round, but the image of referee Steve Smoger saving Trinidad from further abuse at the bell told the story of the fight. It is Tito on the mat. Now, can you fight another round? Asked Trinidad Sr., the trainer now imploring the fighter for assurance. But Tito's pride could not be questioned as he answered the bell for round 11. The crowd chanting, "Tito, Tito," despite the fact it was one-way traffic, with the executioner landing all the clean and telling blows and dominating the action. Then a minute into the final round, Hopkins administered the coup de grace, a powerful right to the jaw that put Trinidad on the mat. And while Felix courageously struggled to his feet, Trinidad Sr. had seen enough. He waved the white towel and entered the ring, prompting referee Steve Smoger to stop the fight. And here's B-Hop. in celebration. Bernard celebrates his breakthrough win. And that was all she wrote. To the shock of many, if not most, fight fans, Bernard Hopkins had dominated and humbled one of the most dangerous champions in the game at that time. And whether you loved him or hated him, no one could now deny that Hopkins was one of the finest boxers in the world, pound for pound. Amazingly, the best years of the 36-year-old's career were yet to be, with legendary victories against Antonio Tarver, Kelly Pavlik, and John Pascal still to come. Perhaps none was as technically perfect as this one. The execution of a surprising and unforgettable knockout of Felix Tito Trinidad. On that night, in the biggest fight of his career, inmate number Y4145 finally got the recognition he had been striving for his entire life. And guess what? He did it his way. There you have it, the fight of the day. Bernard Hopkins versus Felix Trinidad. What's up, Technique? He did it his way. He did it his way. Okay, salute, Technique. All right, so now let's look at this. Another classic trilogy. Today it's going to be Felix Trinidad. No. We just did that. It's going to be Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran. Right. I'm getting ready to say Felix Trinidad and Beehive. That was the fight of the day. Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran is going to be our classic trilogy today on Trilogy Monday. We're going to do Ann Wolf tomorrow on a request from BVO Sports TV. BVO, the troublemaker, Sports TV, requested that I do Ann Wolf, so we're going to do her tomorrow, okay? All right. But salute, Technique. Appreciate you stopping by. Good to see you today, my brother. Hold on. Excuse me for 1 second. Had to get some more light because I'm working off my notes today, written notes today. So, you know, when you're looking on the tablet and stuff, that's got their own light, but I'm in the notebook today, so I had to get a little bit more light. Hope I can read my own handwriting. It might be hard, but let's go. I'm gonna do my best. The Leonard-Duran trilogy, okay? How's everybody? Hope everybody had a great weekend. Good to see everybody again on this side of it. Donnie Williams, what's up, Donnie? Salute. Donnie in the building. The Leonard-Duran trilogy, Donnie. Good to see you. Salute. Okay. Let's do a quick. Who we got in here today so far? We got Donnie Williams. We got Technique. We got Mike Mazik. We got Irony Boxing. We got Mike Rim. And of course, Miss Cass. Okay. The Duran Leonard trilogy. Let's get started. I can't hear all that static. This laptop is like 3 days old. Well, I had it 3 days. I don't know how long since they made it. And man, it's just got all this static. And I don't know what in the world's going on. I just can't win. Since I poured that water in my old faithful laptop that I had for years. Okay, I might take this. This be the third one I took. No, the fourth one I took back. I know them people like, what's this guy? This is old man crazy. He keep coming in here bringing these laptops back. They're gonna see me coming and lock the door. But this one going back too. Okay, but let's get started. Now, the Leonard-Duran trilogy was a series of 3 epic fights between Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran in 1980 and 1989. Okay. Now, the series began with Duran's upset win in the first fight in Montreal, followed by Leonard's evening things up in the No Mas rematch in New Orleans. And it concluded with Leonard securing a majority decision in the third and final fight in Las Vegas. That's the one they shouldn't even have had, but it's part of the trilogy, so we're gonna cover that one too. They was way up at super middleweight somewhere for that third fight. Okay, so let's look at it real quick, briefly, the three fights. Fight number one, the brawl in Montreal, was June 20th, 1980. Now, Leonard, known for his speed and skill, made the mistake of fighting Duran, a renowned brawler, on the inside in an explosive toe-to-toe war. Duran defeated Leonard by a 15-round unanimous decision to win the WBC welterweight title. Okay? So fight two, the No Mas fight, November 25th, 1980, later that same year. These were the first two Four Kings. That first fight, the brawl in Montreal, was the first ever Four Kings fight between those four. And then the third fight of this trilogy was the last fight of the Four Kings, of the four Kings. So Duran and Leonard fought the first and last fight in the series. But fight two was the No Mas fight, November 25th, 1980. Then the rematch, Leonard adopted a completely different strategy, using his movement and superior boxing skills to frustrate and befuddle Duran. At the end of the 8th round, Duran famously turned away from Leonard and quit, shaking his head and apparently saying no mas, which is no more in English, right? Leonard reclaimed the title in a shocking and dramatic finish to this fight. Then, of course, fight number three was called Uno Mas, which is one more. It was originally called the Super Fight or something. No, that was fight two. Fight two was originally called the Super Fight. Then by the end, it was called the No Mas fight. Fight three was called Uno Mas, which means one more in English. December 7th, 1989. Now, by this point, by the time of the third fight, by this point in their careers, both Duran and Leonard were older and past their primes. Duran was 38. And the fight was not competitive. Leonard used constant movement and counterpunching to dominate Duran throughout the 12 rounds, winning a lopsided unanimous decision. And I love both of these fights. Roberto Duran is my favorite fighter of all time, but this fight was clearly a money grab between these two great legends. They just went off of their names and made a whole truckload of money. I'm going to tell you the amounts when we get to it, but that's all this was a money grab, this third fight between Leonard and Duran. That's all it was, right? And I love both of them. Duran, my favorite fighter, but I got to call it like it was just a money grab. They probably called each other, we can make some money, with our names, a third fighter. That's what they did. You can't be mad at them. That's all it was, because the fight wasn't even competitive. The first two fights was at welterweight. They was way up at super middleweight for this fight. Nobody asked for a Duran Leonard 3. Nobody. Okay, nobody. Okay, so now let's take a look at the two fighter styles. Oh, man. Yeah, I left something out. First Leonard. The two fighter styles. First Leonard. Okay. Y'all have to pardon me for like 2 minutes. Man, I can't believe I did that. Give me 2 minutes. Don't leave. This is going to be a great show. I'll be right back. Okay? Oh, man, I can't believe that. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Let's continue. Yeah, let's continue. Okay, now where was I at? Yeah, we get ready to take a quick look at the styles, very briefly. But I promise you, I was like 20 years in my 20s by the third fight, a hardcore boxing fan then, and nobody wanted to see Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard 3. Nobody. Okay, both way past the primes, and yeah. But okay, let's look at a quick look at the two fighters' styles. Oh, I appreciate it. Somebody left. Okay. Quick look at the style. I know we looked at Roberto's style like a couple weeks ago when we did him and Esteban de Jesus trilogy, but let's Sugar Ray Leonard first. Okay. Now Sugar Ray Leonard was extremely versatile in his prime years. He could box when he needed to box, but he could also plant his feet and slug too. Okay? His hands and feet were insanely quick. He had good power in both hands. He was slick and smart and was tougher than anyone ever expected. He took everything Duran and Hearns could dish out and was still standing every time. Leonard could do it all. His style was to move in and out on those quick feet and beat the opposition up with blurry, fast combinations and flurries. Okay. Now Roberto Duran, told you it's gonna be a little real brief boxing styles. Roberto Duran. Now Roberto Duran was a slugger boxer. He was aggressive and often on the attack. At the same time, he was slippery with his head movement on the way in. That was very rare. Now Duran could roll with his punches, with his lightning reflexes, taking the steam off the opponent's shots. Now when Duran made his opponent miss, he was right on top of them, countering with ease or hand. And he blended his offense with his defense, as well as anyone in the history of boxing ever has. Now on the inside, Duran was superior, using angles to avoid being hit while inflicting pain on his opponents. In his prime, Duran had outstanding speed and reflexes. Duran had a right hand lead that he cocked differently than most boxers, okay? Now the way he delivered it, with no wasted motion and without telegraphing it, made it seem like a laser. And Duran hurt guys all the way up, from lightweight to super middleweight, with that right hand he had. Okay, so let's go to one. Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard 1. Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard 1. Okay, let me see something. All right, the Duran Leonard trilogy. How's everybody this Monday afternoon? Right back at the beginning of another big week of boxing history. We're going to be talking about Ann Wolf tomorrow, brought to you by BBO Sports TV. Okay. Yeah. BBO Sports TV from the Sports Talk Network, that BBO. One always trying to start stuff with people. Okay, here we go. Leonard-Duran 1. First fight of the trilogy. This was probably the best one of the three, too. Yeah. Leonard made the mistake of going in there and trying to... Well, Duran took Leonard all out of his game in the build-up, and Leonard went in there and fought angry. And this was the biggest fight of the hand, biggest one of the Hands of Stone's career. And he had some big ones. That's, you know, the way he became my favorite fighter, because, you know, all that Hands of Stone in the 70s. You know, I didn't see that on YouTube or read about it. I lived through that, man. This man in the 70s. 54 wins, 1 loss in the entire decade. Only 1 loss, and that was in the first couple of years of the decade. Okay. The Hands of Stone. No, the Hands of Stone. Roberto-Duran. Okay, let's get this started. The first fight. Duran-Leonard won. Okay. Yeah, there they are right there. That's Duran and Leonard. Now, Duran versus Leonard 1 was June 20th, 1980, right? It was called the Brawl in Montreal. This fight was. Okay. Yeah, I'll use this. Now, time waits for no one, as the old cliche goes. A statement whose meaning the young can barely grasp. But more than 4 decades later, and the memories are still fresh, okay? Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto-Duran, and the fight the entire world could barely wait to see. Now, it's easy to forget how big that event was, simply because the world has changed so much. But, for boxing fans who witnessed it, the first Duran versus Leonard clash remains unforgettable, okay? Unforgettable, that first one. Like I said, to me, that was the best of all 3 of them, that first one. Now, of course, big league boxing was different back then. Not to mention bigger, okay? In a time when most homes had televisions with less than 10 channels on them. This was before pay-per-view. This was before the internet. And the super fight in the post-Ali era was truly a massive global event. Yeah, TVs had some, had might have been less than 5 channels. I know we had ABC, NBC, and CBS. Wasn't no cable and all that stuff. It wasn't no internet, right? You get into an argument with people. It wasn't no Google. You might have to wait months to settle that argument. Nowadays, as fast as you can type, you can find out stuff. But back then, you might have to wait months to find out the answers to stuff you got into a dispute with people over, right? With no Google. Okay, but yeah, this was a massive global event. But still, this was something unique. Sports fans were accustomed to only heavyweights commanding the big crowds and the big money. And Latin American boxers, and no Latin American boxer had ever attracted such keen interest from the general public at that time and the average sports fan, right? Now, both Duran and Leonard, they were more than just boxers, more than just champions. By 1980, they were both superstars. And the showdown was more than just a championship fight, right? It was the one fight everyone somehow just knew would be something memorable, maybe even momentous. The contrasting personalities, backgrounds, and ring styles created an irresistible contest. The fight everyone wanted to see. It was not only one of the most lucrative fights in boxing history, it was a sporting event of global significance. And at that point, it was the richest prize fight in history, okay? And a record breaker for closed circuit television. Yeah, closed circuit was the pay-per-view of the day. They would show the fight on the big screen at movie theaters and basketball arenas, places like that, and you just had to go out and pay for it. Like now you can sit in your home and watch pay-per-view, but you had to pay and go out and sit on the big screens and stuff back then. That was the closed circuit television. Okay. Now, in the months leading up to June 20th, that anticipation and excitement was impossible to overlook. Cover stories and feature articles ran in most major magazines, right? Huge ads appeared in national newspapers. And pre-fight hype was on primetime television. Major venues showing the closed-circuit telecast, such as Madison Square Garden in New York, was packed to the rafters when this fight happened. Okay, for the closed-circuit, places like the Garden was packed to the rafters. In the morning after the fight, reports of the Duran versus Leonard battle were not just in the sports part of the news telecast, actually leading the news stories of the day. Okay, the day after this fight was the leading news story of the news shows coming on, leading out with the Duran versus Leonard fight the next day. Interest remained so high. The fight was aired on primetime television weeks after it took place. And the telecast was a ratings bonanza. Weeks after the fight took place, they were still showing it. Okay? It was still a ratings hit. Now there they are right there. That was the lead up to the promotion to the fight. Okay? Oh man. What did I just do? Now, the organizers of the event, this was the first super fight of the 1980s. Remember, they wasn't even the Four Kings then. This turned out to be the first fight in the Four Kings series. Okay, they weren't even considered part of the Four Kings at that time. And they chose Montreal, Canada for the site. It was the city where it all began for Sugar Ray Leonard, where just 4 years earlier, he had captured the hearts of millions of Americans by winning an Olympic gold medal, remember, for the United States on that 76 team. His flashy boxing style, his television interviews with Albert Cosell, highlighting his natural charm, and the story of how he had competed in Montreal with a photograph of his sweetheart taped inside his boxing shoes. That all helped to make him a star and secure lucrative endorsement contracts from companies such as 7-Up and Nabisco. So surely the memories of his Olympic triumphs just 4 short years earlier would translate into a pro-Leonard crowd in Montreal for this fight, as opposed to the pro-Duran Hispanics, who would have flooded the stands of many venues such as Las Vegas, New York, or California, right? So everybody thought it was going to be a pro-Leonard crowd up here for this fight. But it didn't turn out that way. Because boxing fans make up their own minds. And the ones in Montreal for this fight wasn't about to cheer for the media darling just because the television networks and corporate sponsors expected them to. And Roberto Duran also made a shrewd move to win over the locals. Fresh off the plane when they arrived for the fight, he told reporters he loved the French-Canadian people and was thrilled to be in Quebec. And while he was training in Montreal for this fight, Duran wore a t-shirt emblazoned with Bonjour Montreal. And to further ensure that the Quebec fight fans stayed in his corner, Duran's entourage carried aloft on his ring walk not only the Panamanian flag during his ring walk to the fight, but also a huge blue and white Canadian flag. So unexpectedly, and for the first time in his career, Leonard was competing in front of a hostile crowd. Okay? Surprisingly to Leonard, it was a pro-Duran crowd. It is Duran training with the Bonjour Montreal shirt on. He had no moss, Donnie. No more. Yeah, that's what we're going to get to that. We'll get to all that. Yeah. Now, and it was by far the biggest crowd of Leonard's career, not to mention Duran's also. Biggest crowd of both these fighters' careers. And Montreal's massive Olympic Stadium accommodated a mob of almost 50,000 that wet June night. 50,000 people. That was one of the biggest gatherings to attend a boxing event anywhere in the last several decades, okay? A testament to the widespread excitement the matchup had inspired, okay? And thankfully, the battle itself more than lived up to the hype. The fight more than lived up to the hype. Now, Duran versus Leonard was a Greek tragedy in 3 acts. A thrilling, fast-paced, grueling war that ebbed and flowed. Now, Duran dominated the early rounds. Leonard coming back in the middle frames, and both fighters battling with fury in the final stages. The fight was so competitive and hard fought that the outcome remained in doubt until the moment the official decision was finally announced. Yeah, right up to when the decision was announced. Nobody had no idea who was going to win this fight. Thought it was leaning toward Duran, but it was a great battle by both fighters, man. Nobody knew up till the announcer announced, and knew. Hands up stone. Okay? The new winner was the Hands of Stone. Now, in the lead up to the battle, Sugar Ray Leonard told the press he had no intention of showing Duran any more respect than he had shown Pete Ranzani and Andy Price, opponents who had suffered the full wrath of Leonard's blistering attack and were battered to submission in short order. Flat-footed. That's what Sugar Ray declared when he was asked how he would fight Duran. The man who, without question, represented the most powerful and formidable opponent of Leonard's career to that point. Leonard said, "I will not run." And as early as the first round, it was evident Leonard was a man of his word, as he caught a charging Duran with a flush left hook before spinning away, and then, to everyone's astonishment, coming forward, looking to trade with Duran, right? And before the end of the first round, that sequence had repeated itself. Leonard was standing and trading, okay? And that's what he said he was going to do, right? But if Leonard had held his own in the face of Roberto Duran's attack in round 1, in the second round, Duran showed why Leonard's tactical choice was perhaps not the wisest one. Now, with Duran pressing and both fighters looking to land big shots, Duran surprised Leonard with a sharp follow-up left that almost knocked him off his feet and forced him to hold. Now, Leonard did not appear seriously hurt, but the punch signaled that it was Duran who had the momentum, a fact borne out by Duran dominating the action in the next 2 rounds, continually forcing Sugar Ray to the ropes and unloading heavy shots on him. Okay? Continually putting Sugar Ray on the ropes, unloading heavy shots on him. But Sugar Ray staying off the ropes and finding room to let his quicker hands go. Took round 5. And near the end of the round, he dug in some painful looking body shots before willingly going toe to toe with Duran. And to the surprise of many, getting the better of the exchange, right? Leonard was fighting Duran's fight and wasn't doing too bad. So in the 6th round, Leonard dictated turns behind his left hand, beating Duran to the punch and forcing the Panamanian to respect his hooks. Round 7 saw Duran attempt to reassert himself as he pinned Sugar Ray to the ropes again. But this time Sugar Ray, who was getting off first, spun Duran. And for the first time, it was Duran's back to the ropes. A series of brutal exchanges ensued, with Duran landing the heavier punches, including some vicious inside uppercuts. Yeah, this was a serious fight here. The brawl in Montreal, right? So then it was Leonard's turn to score with hard uppercuts in round 8. One of which knocked Duran back on his heels. And suddenly, it was Leonard stalking Duran from ring center. Leonard stayed off the ropes, and his quicker hands allowed him to control the action before the round ended with a furious exchange. Both men landing. So in the 9th round, Duran maintained the frenetic pace, right? Crowding Leonard. And then in the 9th round, a clash of heads opened up a cut wound. And it appeared to bother Leonard. And again, the round concluded with a ferocious exchange. So in the 10th round, the action returned to the middle of the ring, where Leonard stunned Duran with a left hook. But seconds later, Duran landed a perfectly timed overhand right, demonstrating extraordinary conditioning. Duran continued to apply unrelenting pressure, forcing Leonard to give ground again and again. But at the end of the round, Leonard rebounded with a series of sharp blows. So now we're getting late in this one. Now. Now the fight had already seen 10 rounds of intense action. Round 11 was nothing short of extraordinary, as both warriors stayed on the inside and took turns firing flurries of punches. Once again, Duran, the relentless bull, forced Leonard to the ropes and kept him there by sheer physical strength before Leonard spun him around. But Duran then deftly spun Leonard back and continued to hold the upper hand, forcing Leonard into his own corner and outworking him. Near the end of the round, Leonard tried to steal it with a series of flurries, but Duran replied with an onslaught of his own. And Duran landed the cleanest shots to end the round, okay? Leonard tried to steal it, but, Duran had the great radar cellar. They had seen that on film and was ready for that. And when Leonard tried to steal that round, Duran responded right back with a flurry of his own, and Duran ended the round with the cleaner shots. Okay? And now I don't know if I changed the display or not. But yeah, there we go. Change it again. Okay? So round 12 might have been scored for either man, as both had their moments. And while it was one of the less eventful rounds in this amazing war, it would have constituted 3 minutes of fervent action in almost any other fight. Okay? Round 12 in this fight was like a slow round, but any other fight, it probably would have been a round of the year. Okay? That's just how this fight was. Round 13 saw Duran coming forward with renewed urgency as the vicious left hand snapped back Leonard's head. And once again, Leonard showed his chin was not to be questioned. Okay? A minute later, another hook from Duran connected audibly. Leonard took the shot and fired back. A right hand lead from Duran landed flush, but incredibly, Leonard replied with 2 rights of his own before maneuvering Duran to the ropes. But then Duran forced the champion to once again give ground. The last 30 seconds saw a non-stop toe-to-toe exchange, with Duran landing big left hooks before Leonard answered back with his own heavy artillery. Round 14 began with a singular moment. Angelo Dundee, Leonard's trainer, exhorting Leonard and pointing right at the Panamanian as if to say, "Go get that sucker." And Duran waving right back at them as if to say, "You want it? Come get it." This round 14. The legend of this famous fight says that Leonard clearly took the final 2 rounds, as Duran, having announced to his corner at the end of round 13 that he had already won the fight. Okay? He coasted in the last 2 rounds. But despite Leonard battling with fury and attempting a wind-up bolo punch, it was in fact Duran who landed the heavier and more effective shots in the penultimate stanza, including another vicious left hook that had many wondering how Leonard absorbed such a blow without buckling. Okay? You had to cry, how did Leonard take that one without buckling? Okay? 21 YGL Green Light is back in the building. Salute. How are you today? 21 YGL Green Light. Good to see you today, my friend. There you go. 21 YGL Green Light. Appreciate the all the input you had Friday. And the I think it was the no, it was the show we was doing about I forgot, but yeah, 21 Green Light was giving some good questions. I appreciate that. Good to see you back today. Yeah, we talking about the Leonard-Duran trilogy. Now, where was it? We was going into the final round, I think. Yeah, the final 3 minutes brought more unforgettable moments, including Leonard waving at Duran with both fists before the bell rang to start the round, while the huge crowd and even the press section stood on their feet and applauded before the last round began. Okay, everybody, the press section, everybody was on their feet. Now, the extraordinary battle, right? Everybody was on their feet before the last round. And, you know, before the last round started, Duran refused to touch gloves. Referee Carlos Padilla had to grab Duran's wrist and make him and put it out there and touch Leonard's glove, okay? And indeed, the supremely confident Duran did arrogantly concede the final round, letting Leonard unload punch after punch while throwing little in return, okay? And that move right there, I know Duran regretted that, because when he taunted Leonard right there, that led directly to what happened to him in fight 2. Leonard taunted him mercilessly. That led to the No Moss incident. I know Duran regretted that move, but we're going to get to it. That was the first fight. Duran was the one that started the taunting. Okay. and he lived to regret it. But anyway, where were we? Okay. Yeah, Duran just conceded the last round because he had told his corner after round 13, I got this one. Okay. But with seconds left, and after deftly slipping a series of shots from Leonard, without bothering to counter, Duran targeted Sugar Ray, sticking out his chin and pointing at it as if to say, you can't touch me. That's that picture right there, right? At the final bell, Sugar Ray raised his arms in triumph, and Duran took great exception, shoving Leonard and cursing him. That's it right there. As a mob of people poured through the ropes, it was a fight unlike any other, and the entire scene was unlike any witnessed before in the prize ring. Okay? It is. Sugar Ray raised his arms like he had won the fight, and Duran didn't like that, and he pushed Sugar Ray and cursed at him. There's Sugar Ray, Jenks Morton, his brother Roger in the orange over there, Angelo, and Duran's trainer Ray Arcel restraining Duran. Angelo Dundee, Sugar Ray's trainer with the dark hair. That's Ray Arcel with the gray hair. They both restraining Duran, right? Because Sugar Ray raised his arms, and Duran said, "You didn't win. Put your arms down, man." And that's Leonard Jenks Morton, one of his cornermen, is Roger, brother in the orange right there. Okay. So now the unanimous decision went to Duran. And there were no serious arguments to dispute it. And yet, the fight was deadly close, as both pugilists had given astonishing performances, both winning their share of rounds. The battle demanded the very best of two truly great champions. And for Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard, the brawl in Montreal ranks with the finest efforts of their illustrious careers. Among all the super fights of recent decades, Duran vs. Leonard 1 stands out for the skill and display and the sheer intensity of the combat. Yes, that was. And I seen that live. I wasn't there. I seen it on the closed circuit. Okay, I saw it at the Baltimore Arena, and then for the second fight, I was overseas. So that's too much information. Anyway, here's your winner. Roberto Duran won it, right? Okay, and Duran versus Leonard 1 was not only a great event in and of itself, it ushered in a decade of super fights between new stars in the lower weight classes, right? Yeah, because back then that was the 70s, the decade of the great champions of the 70s and all that, and everybody was just, all on the heavyweights. But this fight showed everybody that we can get some great fights in the lower weight classes too, right? Because like I said, it was primarily the heavyweights, and especially Muhammad Ali, who commanded huge purses and major media attention. But in the 80s, Leonard, Duran, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Aaron Pryor, and Alexis Arguello all had their share of the spotlight and earned millions of dollars. And it was that first thrilling war between stone hands and fast hands that made it all possible, that lured scores of new fans to the sport while proving big bucks could be made with the smaller men. Okay? Yeah, it proved big bucks could be made by the lower divisions in boxing. And needless to say, this was the greatest victory of Roberto Duran's career. A superlative performance and a win, which capped an incredible decades-long run at the elite level of the sport. His record now stood at an astonishing 72 wins and 1 loss, with 55 knockouts. And boxing pundits were liberally comparing him to the immortality, to the immortals of the past, putting the bearded warrior with the defiant scowl and arrogant swagger in the same league as Sugar Ray Robinson, Joe Louis, and Henry Armstrong. And Duran had only lost one fight in the 70s, right? This was the 80s then. And he lost that one fight like early in the decade, like 72. Okay. So 72 wins, one loss at that point. He started fighting in the 60s. 54-1 in the 70s. Okay. What's up, Trump? Salute. Roberto the Red and Sugar Ray Leonard today. Good to see you today, Trump. No, it's not no 3:13. No damn way, man. That clock got to be wrong. Wow. Okay. So let's go to. But given all that the Red had accomplished, along with his astonishing performance against the younger, faster, and naturally bigger Leonard, these comparisons were entirely fitting, which of course made the fiasco in New Orleans just 5 short months later all the more regrettable. So let's go to that. The fiasco in New Orleans. That wasn't the name of it, but it was the No Mas fight. Leonard-Duran 2. Started out as the super fight, but ended up being the No Mas fight. Okay? Yeah. Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran 2. The No Mas fight, November 25th, 1980. Now, Roberto Duran versus Sugar Ray Leonard 2 was originally billed as the super fight, but it later became popularly known as the No Mas fight. And this fight happened November 25th, 1980 at the Louisiana Superdome. It was for the WBC and the Ring Welterweight Championships, which were held by Roberto Duran coming in. He took those titles from Sugar Ray in the first fight, right? Took place at the Louisiana Superdome. And it was the second of 3 fights between the fighters. Now, the fight gained its name from the moment at the end of the 8th round when Duran turned away from Leonard towards the referee and quit by apparently saying no mas, which in English is no more, right? Yeah, that's what they said. He said no mas. Now, Duran said he didn't say it. He said Howard Cosell made that up. Yeah, Duran blamed it on Howard. We're going to get into that too. Okay. So, now Sugar Ray Leonard versus Roberto Duran had first fought on June 20th, 1980 in Montreal. Now Leonard was defending the WBC Welterweight Championship for the second time. Duran was a WBC #1 welterweight contender. Now, Leonard abandoned his usual slick boxing style and stood flat-footed with Duran. Duran won the first fight by a narrow but unanimous decision with scores 148-147, 145-144, and 146-144. Yeah, those are 15-round scores, right? Okay. Now, in the rematch, Leonard abandoned the flat-footed toe-to-toe style he had used in the first fight. This time, he used his superior speed and movement to outbox and befuddle Duran. The entire fight, I was moving, Leonard said. And boom, I snapped his head back with a jab. Boom, I snapped it back again. He tried to get me against the ropes. I'd pivot, spin off, and pow, come under with a punch. The Leonard seized the initiative in the very first round and never yielded it. Near the midway point of the first round, after the two had cautiously felt each other out, Duran lunged into Leonard and bowled him into the ropes, as he had done so effectively in the first fight in June, right? Yeah, Duran tried the same tactics, but Leonard was ready this time. But now, Leonard spun away and landed the right hand. They exchanged punches. When Leonard caught the champion with a solid 1-2 at the end of the round, Duran smiled at him. Now the pace quickened in the second round, and Leonard's effectiveness became more pronounced. He banged 2 rights to Duran's head, snapping it back, and then circled and jabbed. Now Duran seemed puzzled as he started to throw a right hand, but instead held back on the punch, as he seemed to sense Leonard had it measured. Duran scored well in the third and fifth rounds and won both on the scorecards. But he was never able to take control of the fight as he had done in Montreal. Never able to take control of it this time. He continued to stalk Leonard, but the challenger repeatedly escaped, feigning to keep Duran off balance, dancing in and out of range, and making a very effective use of his jab, which he had not done in Montreal. As the fight went on, Leonard was countering well with his left when Duran tried to work his way inside. Now, Duran had some success pushing and bullying Leonard into the ropes in the fifth round, which he won, right? But other than that, Duran couldn't find a place inside. Unlike the first fight, this time Leonard had learned how to create some space and pivot away from Duran. Now, when Duran did get inside to attack the body, Leonard answered him with whistling uppercuts, right? Now, neither man was ever seriously hurt in the rematch. But as the fight got around the halfway point, Leonard could sense Duran's increasing frustration, okay? Yeah, Leonard started to sense Duran was getting increasingly frustrated. And there's the moment it happened right there. Duran quit. Now, it was one thing for Duran to be frustrated, unable to mount or sustain an attack. It was something totally different for the feared and intimidating Manos de Piedra, or the Hands of Stone, to be taunted and made a fool of, to be dared to throw a punch. Now, Leonard later said he did not plan to do what he did ahead of time, but he had planned to, at some point in the fight, to be cute and try to anger Duran. So in round 7, Leonard began to taunt Duran. And late in the round, he threw the most memorable punch of the night. Winding up his right hand as if to throw a bolo, he suddenly snapped the left jab that caught Duran flush in the face. Okay? It made his eyes water, Leonard said after the fight. And after the punch, Leonard taunted Duran mercilessly. He stuck out his chin, inviting Duran to hit him. Yeah, he stuck out his chin at him, inviting Duran to hit him. Duran just froze as Leonard kept it up, moving, stopping, mugging. Leonard scored again with his left hook. At the bell, Duran trudged back to his corner with a faint smile on his face. Now Leonard continued to taunt in the 8th round, and in the closing seconds, Duran turned his back to him and quit, apparently saying to the referee, Octavio Moran, no mas. which is English for no more. In English, it means no more. Leonard was the winner by a technical knockout at 2 minutes 44 seconds of round 8, regaining the WBC welterweight championship. Leonard led by a small margin of 68-66 on 2 cards and 67-66 on the third, right? At the time of the stoppage, Duran was well within the fight, you know. One knockdown would turn the fight around. Now, Duran has said that he never said the words "no mas" to anyone following the fight. That's what he said. He blamed the broadcaster Howard Cosell for coming up with that and claiming Howard Cosell was the one that said it. Duran said he was only mumbling to himself, "No seagull, no seagull, no seagull," meaning I'm not carrying on. I mean, no mas, no seagull, no more, I'm not carrying on. What's the difference? You know, what is the difference? You still quit, right, Roberto? Now, Duran has said that he quit because of stomach cramps, which started to bother him in the 5th round. He said the cramps occurred because he took off weight too quickly, then ate too much after the morning weigh-in. But his manager, Carlos Elita, said Duran always ate that way before a fight. Now, Duran didn't quit because of stomach cramps, Elita says. He quit because he was embarrassed. That was his manager. Now, Leonard claimed credit for having forced Duran to give up and took great satisfaction in it. "I made him quit," said Leonard. "To make a man quit, to make the great Roberto Duran quit, was better than knocking him out." Okay, that's what Leonard said. To make him quit was better than knocking him out. Okay. Trump says, referee Octavio used to work Tyson versus Douglas in Japan. Okay, or that was Moran. Okay, Trump. Yeah. YGL's Roberto Duran was partying and drinking after the fight. Sugar Ray Leonard won the rematch with Duran after that second fight. He beat him. Yeah, we're gonna get to that too. Okay. Now, not many people believe or bought into Duran's cramp story. One big reason it's unbelievable is if he began to feel the cramps in the 5th round and the fight lasted until the 8th round, why did Roberto not mention it to any of his corner? Trainer Ray Arcel, cornerman Freddie Brown, and manager Carlos Elita all heard the cramp story at the same time as the rest of the world after the fight. Yeah, he said he started suffering cramps in the 5th round. For 3 rounds, he never mentioned it to any member of his corner. That's what makes that so hard to believe. And his manager Carlos Elita said he quit because he was getting embarrassed, right? But there's credence in the following situation. Duran's manager, Panamanian businessman Carlos Elita, made the mistake of scheduling the fight too close after the first fight, not allowing Duran enough time to drop the excessive weight properly. Okay, yeah, that's what happened. That's where the mistake was made by his manager. Yeah, he didn't allow him time to drop the weight properly. And Duran's stature in his home country of Panama took a dramatic dive after the fight. The immediate reaction was shock, followed by anger. Within hours, commercials featuring Duran in both Panama and the United States were ordered off the air. Wow. On June 16th, 1983, on Duran's 32nd birthday, he knocked out undefeated Davey Moore in the 8th round to win the WBA Junior Middleweight Championship. In Panama, there was rejoicing in the streets. Yeah, he made a nice comeback from the no mas situation. Yeah, he really did. Yep. Now, Leonard-Duran fought a third and final time on December 7th, 1989 in Las Vegas, Nevada, with Leonard retaining the WBC Super Middleweight Championship in a lopsided 12-round unanimous decision. Now, before we go to the third fight, let's take a look at this. Why exactly did Roberto quit? Let's look at that. Why exactly did Roberto quit? Glad y'all asked. Let's talk about it. Why did Duran quit? Now, there's a documentary on this subject, which actually brought Duran and Leonard face to face. And they discussed the subject, the fight, why he quit, everything. I see a pretty good documentary too. Yeah, Duran and Leonard was there together. I think it was made about, 2018, 19, something like that. That's when I saw it. I don't know when it was made, but that's when I saw it. But anyway, now Duran stuck with his story, which is that he had been living the good life and had blown up in weight. He tells the same story today that he told the world 45 years ago after the fight. A story that not many accepted, including his close friend and trainer, Ray Arcel, didn't accept it. His manager, Carlos Elita, didn't accept it. And the Panamanian people did not accept it. Very few people believe Roberto quit because of stomach cramps. Okay, very few. There's Leonard taunting him. Now, Duran quit because he was being humiliated and embarrassed. Now, Duran himself had taunted Leonard in the final seconds of the 15th round of the first fight, right? That's why I said he lived to regret that when he did that 15th round of that first fight. Now, it was being done to him, and more significantly, by the exact same opponent, right? And he could not handle it. That's why he quit, okay? And at that time, and this is coming from somebody who, Roberto Duran is his favorite. Roberto Duran is my favorite fighter, but that's what happened. He taunted Sugar Ray in that last round, and now he's sitting there, the same man is in front of his face, beating him, getting ready to take up. What was a close fight when Sugar Ray was starting to take over? And the same man he had taunted is in his face, taunting him mercilessly. Roberto couldn't handle it. He quit. That's why he quit. There wasn't no stomach cramps or anything. He was embarrassed. His own manager said that, right? And at that time, there was no love lost between them. In fact, it was extremely personal between Roberto and Sugar Ray. Now, Leonard had thought he could beat Duran at his own game going into the first fight and went toe-to-toe with Duran for 15 brutal rounds. Now, Duran won a close fight, and Leonard found himself unsettled and seeking a rematch. Leonard proclaimed, "Last time we fought his fight, this time we will fight my fight." And it was a completely different fight. Not only did Leonard begin to take control of the fight in the middle rounds, he started to toy with Duran in a manner that Roberto had never experienced before. Sugar Ray was successful in getting to Duran mentally. He got to him mentally. Just like Duran took Sugar Ray out of his game going into the first fight, and Sugar Ray fought angry and fought Duran's fight. Sugar Ray got into Duran's head during that fight, the second fight, right? And Sugar Ray got to Roberto mentally, and instead of continuing the fight and attempting to deal with Leonard's tactics, Roberto elected to give up, right? He quit, claiming he had been suffering from stomach cramps since the 5th round. But like I just said, between the 5th and 8th rounds before he quit, he never once mentioned stomach cramps to any member of his team, of his corner team. Duran quit because he was embarrassed, but he still was then and is now an all-time great, okay? So now let's go to the third fight. Still an all-time great and made a nice comeback from that. Quidditch. But he quit because he was being embarrassed. This was the hands of stone, man. Man went through the 70s with one loss, brutalizing fighters. And now he's getting taunted. And this was the same man he had taunted, remember, in the first fight. So Roberto couldn't handle that, man. He said, no mas. No mas. Okay. Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto-Duran, 3. This was the fight nobody wanted. That should have been the title of it. Instead of Uno Mas, the title should have been The Fight Nobody Wanted. They way up at super middleweight. But anyway, it was called Uno Mas. December 7th, 1989. Okay? And it was contested for the WBC super middleweight title, which was held by Leonard coming in to this fight. Took place at the Mirage in Paradise, Nevada. Now, reigning WBC super middleweight champion Sugar Ray Leonard had made his first defense, which was a draw in a rematch with Thomas the Hitman Hearns. Now, after the Hearns fight, Leonard began negotiations for both a third fight with rival Roberto-Duran and a potential third fight with Hearns. Now, while third Hearns fight never came to fruition, Leonard and Duran would reach an agreement to face each other. And the fight was announced at a press conference on July 26, 1989. Though the venue which the fight would take place was still in question. Okay? And then, 5 days after that, the then yet to be opened Mirage was announced as the venue for the fight. Now, in the meantime, Duran had won the WBC since the last fight with Leonard. Duran had won the WBC middleweight title after upsetting Iran Barkley in his previous fight. Though only Leonard's super middleweight title would be on the line in this fight. Now, Leonard and Duran agreed to a catch weight of 162 pounds between the middleweight limit of 160 and the super middleweight limit of 168. Okay? Yeah, this was fought at a catch weight. Now, initial plans called for both Leonard and Duran's titles to be at stake, but Duran's mandatory challenger, Lindell Holmes, refused to step aside. He refused to take step-aside money, and he insisted on Duran making his next defense against him, resulting in Duran's title not being on the line for this fight, okay? Now, the fight was billed as Uno Mas, or Once More. It should have been called The Fight Nobody Wanted. But Uno Mas was in reference to Leonard and Duran's second fight against each other. You know, when Duran quit in round 8, okay? Uno Mas, one more. Now, Leonard made $15 million and Duran made $7.6 million for this fight. Now, Leonard's purse from this fight made him the first boxer to earn over $100 million in his career from purses. And Leonard came into the fight as a 7-5 favorite to win it. The fight was held in an outdoor arena, the Mirage. It was a chilly night, and Leonard's corner applied a blanket around him between rounds. Now, in contrast to the first two fights, this was entirely lopsided in Leonard's favor. Told you, the fight nobody wanted. It was just a money grab. Just a money grab. That's all it was. So that's you know, I mean, stuff that's going on nowadays in boxing didn't just start now. It was always like that. Like, remember Mel got in there with Canelo to get the check. That's all this third Leonard-Duran fight was, a money grab to get a check. Duran made $15 million. Duran made 7 point something. Okay. Now, using constant movement and counterpunching, Leonard dominated the 38-year-old Duran completely, neutralizing Duran's offense. Duran didn't care. He was getting $7.7 million. He didn't care about being dominated. It was just a money grab. Now, Leonard landed 227 punches, good for 52% of his total thrown punches, compared to Duran, who landed a dismal 84 punches at 14% rate. Told you it's just a money grab. Duran landed 84 punches the entire 12 rounds. 84 punches. Come on, man. The fight nobody wanted. That's what it should have been called. 84 punches in 12 rounds, man. That's crazy. That's like 7 punches a round. Duran was just in there to get that check, and so was Leonard. Like it should have been called the fight nobody wanted. Right? But anyway, Duran laid it up. 84 punches for the fight. That's crazy. 14%. That's what his rate was for the fight. 14% of his total punches. And the fight went the full 12-round distance, with all 3 judges scoring the fight for Leonard. 120, 110, 119, 109, 116, 111. Okay. He won it. Leonard won it very widely. This was the final fight between them. The fight nobody wanted. Okay? That's the title I'm giving it. Not no Uno Mars. The fight nobody wanted. In August of 1990, Leonard relinquished the WBC super middleweight title, saying that he was under the weight for the division. He then offered Thomas Hearns the 3rd fight, right? But Hearns said he could no longer make the weight and moved up to light heavyweight, right? Yeah, Hearns said, I can't make that no more. He moved on up. And the way they cheated him in that 2nd fight, I wouldn't fight Sugar Ray no more either if I was Hearns. I mean, it's like damn near no-win situation. Knocked the man down 2 times. Clearly wasn't a fight. They called it a draw. And then Sugar Ray and Roberto Duran, how they look now, okay? Today, Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran are legendary figures in the sport of boxing. Known for their skill, accomplishments, and the intense rivalry that occurred between them, okay? They are both also remembered as being part of the 4 kings of boxing in the 1980s, along with Thomas Hearns and Marvin Hagler. Now, Leonard was celebrated for his agility, speed, and technical prowess, capturing world titles in 5 different weight classes. Only one of 6 men to do it. Bud Crawford was the last one. Now, Duran, nicknamed Manos de Piedra or the Hands of Stone, was renowned for his aggressive fighting style, powerful punches, and relentless pressure. Duran held world championships in 4 weight classes and is widely regarded as the greatest lightweight of all time. Okay, Roberto Duran. Yeah, there they go again. Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard in later life. They became great friends, but they wasn't great friends when them first 2 fights. Now, by the 3rd fight, the great friendship had started, right? That's what the fight that nobody wanted. But the first 2 fights was very personal. No love lost between them. Okay. The 3rd fight, you know, just like a sparring match. Okay, that's all it was. Duran made 7. Sugar Ray made 15 for a sparring match. Right, that 3rd fight. But anyway, beyond their individual accomplishments, the rivalry between Leonard and Duran significantly boosted the popularity of boxing in the 1980s, creating unforgettable moments and showcasing contrasting boxing styles. Now, the fights are still celebrated today as some of the most thrilling and iconic in boxing history. And there you have it, the Leonard-Duran trilogy, or the Duran-Leonard trilogy. Okay. Between those 2 great legends. The first 2 fights are classics. The 3rd fight, it made it a trilogy. That's why I'm thankful for the 3rd fight. It made it a trilogy. That's all. The significance of the 3rd fight is it made this series a trilogy. Other than that, you know, way up at super middleweight. Okay. Duran clearly came for a chip. Sugar Ray did too, but wow. Duran landed 84 punches, 14% of his punches in that last fight, man. The hands of stone landed 14% of his punches. They need to erase that off of his record. But how would you explain Marvin Hagler? Okay, here. How would you explain why Tommy Hearns destroyed Roberto Duran in a fight? Marvin Hagler labored over 15 rounds against Duran, but Hagler destroyed Tommy Hearns in the third round of their fight. How would you explain that? Styles make fights, right? Styles make fights. So let's talk about that since we're on the Four Kings today. Finish this off. We're not going to get it in, but hey, let's talk about it. Now, boxing is complicated like that. Because, like, Ali went life or death with Joe Frazier over 3 fights, but stopped George Foreman, who knocked out Frazier in both of their fights. Like I just said, as everyone says, styles make fights. Now, Duran was a natural lightweight who moved up as he aged. He had a great chin against lightweights. But Hearns was a naturally bigger guy with devastating one-shot power. The Hagler had an all-time great chin and was a natural middleweight, right? So that explains that. Styles make fights. Duran coming from lightweight, right? Hearns, the bigger man at welterweight with the all-time right hand, easily destroyed Duran. But then against Hagler at middleweight with an all-time chin, totally different fight. Styles make fights. And Tommy was vulnerable to power shots, but he hit hard. But there can be additional complications that affect the fighter's performance in a fight. And in the case of Duran, he was very accomplished in the second part of his career. Okay? Very accomplished in the second part of his career. Okay. Now, during the 70s, Roberto Duran was a wrecking machine at lightweight, with only 1 point lost in the entire decade that he advanced twice. He carried that form up to his welterweight title challenge against Sugar Ray Leonard, which he won. Okay? First fight. But that win probably was the end of Roberto's prime. After that, he became more erratic. He blew the Leonard rematch. Before the fight even begun, by failing to properly prepare. Now that became a pattern to blow up in weight between fights. And as a result of that, and his advancing age, Roberto sometimes seemed lackluster. And he also liked to spend money and was signed to fight almost anyone if the money was right, even if he was grossly out of shape and it didn't leave much preparation time. Okay? Now, Hearns. Listen to some pictures here. Now, the Hitman. No one ever thought Hearns was soft. With his intimidating presence, muscular physique, and no, that's Hagler, I'm sorry. Despite his stinging jab and slick footwork, Hearns is mainly remembered for his chilling power with the right hand. He was a wrecking machine but came unstuck against Leonard in their first fight. In a surprising role reversal, Hearns outboxed Leonard for most of the fight before Leonard turned the tables and beat Hearns, stopping him in the 14th round. Now this is important because it affected Duran's perception of Hearns. Duran, according to people close to him, didn't see Hearns as much of a threat and figured he was soft going into that fight with Hearns. Okay? Big mistake, Roberto. Hagler. No one ever thought Hagler was soft. With his intimidating presence, muscular physique, and shaved head, he was cutting a swath through the middleweight contenders. But beneath the tough exterior was a fighter who felt slighted by the boxing world. He never felt he got the credit he deserved as a boxer, and he wanted big names on his record to prove them wrong and earn respect. He was powerful, but not so much of a one-shot banger, tending to beat people up before stopping them. Okay? So what did this mean in the ring? When Hagler fought Duran, Roberto Duran, in the process of rehabilitating his damaged reputation, he quit in the second Leonard fight, had been outpointed easily by Benitez, and then lost to unknown but very talented British fighter, Kirkland Lang. So everyone thought Duran's days were done as a top fighter, but he put together a few wins, stayed in shape, and then won a title at junior middleweight by beating the odds and beating the hell out of Davey Moore. Hagler versus Duran. Okay, we got 10 minutes. Hagler versus Duran. We're gonna look at these three fights. This little triangle, show you the styles make fights, because like I was just saying, Hearns destroyed Duran, right? Hagler went 15 rounds with Duran, but Hagler stopped Hearns. So Hagler versus Duran. Duran came into the fight on a winning streak and in good shape. Hagler, despite being a long reigning champion, was in his first real super fight against an established great. He was also aware of Duran's knowledge of the dark arts and was apparently concerned that Roberto might foul his way to a stoppage. Hagler often felt the world was against him and believed that if Duran fouled him, the judges and ref might go against him. The harder as it is to believe now, the pressure got to Hagler a little. He was overly cautious. He only really won the fight in the last few rounds, upping the pressure. Had he done that sooner, it's possible he could have broken Duran down and stopped him, but we'll never know. But Hagler did win it, and then Duran came in. Hagler was training for a war. Duran came in and boxed early in the fight, right? So Duran versus Hearns. Duran versus Hearns. Now, according to people close to him, Duran partied hard after the Hagler fight. He made a lot of money, and although he lost his performance against a dominant, bigger fighter, restored some of his tarnished reputation. So he celebrated long and hard. Now, the Hearns fight promised a decent payday, which he needed. He was overweight when he signed for the fight. But as mentioned earlier, he didn't rate Hearns that highly. Hearns, on the other hand, had a point to prove. He lost his super fight with Leonard, suffered an injury to his right hand that many felt had blunted his power. And Hearns came out to destroy Duran. and was far more aggressive against him than Hagler had been. Duran probably figured it made sense to slug it out and exploit Hearn's fragile chin. He was wrong. Apparently, he was a lot more respectful of Hearns after that, maybe even a little intimidated. He carried on talking shit about Leonard, but never said a bad word about Hearns again. And it was just a nightmare style matchup, you know. Hearns had like 6 inches of height, like 8 inches of reach on Duran, and no way, how was Duran gonna, Duran wasn't gonna outbox Hearns like he was doing Hagler. Hearns just had too much reach and stuff, so Duran had to get inside and just had too much to go through. And finally, Hagler versus Hearns, that classic fight, Hagler versus Hearns. Hearns had the best one-shot power. Wait a minute. Hagler versus Hearns. Now, after his close call in the Duran fight, Hagler didn't want to take any chances. Plus, he was pissed off at everyone raving about Hearns' power. And maybe he was aware that his legs were getting a little slower, and that engaging in a chess match with a taller, faster guy was a mistake. So he gambled it all on an all-out assault. He nearly came unstuck as Hearns landed a peach of a shot and stunned him. But after that, Hagler didn't give Hearns a moment's peace, chasing him and landing hard shots. Okay, so to summarize this, Hagler had the best chin. Hearns had the best one-shot power. Duran was a good boxer with a decent chin and okay power. At middleweight, junior middleweight, or lightweight, he was a big puncher with a great chin. The Hearns punch was greater than Duran's chin, but not greater than Hagler's chin. Hagler's punch wasn't greater than Duran's chin, so he had to grind out the win against Duran. Styles make fights. Okay, there you have it. Today was the Hagler-Duran trilogy. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Ann Wolf. Requested by BBO Sports TV. Appreciate everybody stopping through today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Trump, 21 YGL green light, Donnie Williams, Technique, Mike Mazik, Irony Boxing, Mike Rim, and Miss Cass. The Leonard-Duran trilogy. 2 classic fights, 1 money grab, but it made a great trilogy. Okay? Have to be thankful for that last money grab fight because we wouldn't have had a trilogy without it. Right? And don't forget, tomorrow is Ann Wolf. Life and career of Ann Wolf. Thomas Hill. What's up, Thomas Hill? Good to see you today. Appreciate you, T. Hill. Ann Wolf tomorrow. Okay? If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's The Box Story. It's bringing you all that boxing history. Everybody have a great afternoon. Appreciate y'all 1,000,000%.